Hi everyone, you know that space is the final frontier. At least that's what some people say it is. I know that there have been TV shows and movies, and even the science community likes to refer to it as the final frontier. It's a great place for exploration. There is so much we don't know. Fortunately, now we have spacecraft that allow us to go into space and study it. Now, we've had that spacecraft probably 50 years, 60 years, started back in 1958 when Yuri Gagarin, who was a Soviet astronaut, shot into space and basically started a race between the US and the Soviet Union. So ever since then, we've been moving forward with our shots into space, our spacecraft going into space. And we've done that activity ever since 1959-ish, when we started with the Mercury program. Mercury was our first shot at space. Friendship 7 was the name of the craft. John Glenn was the astronaut. He orbited the Earth for the first time in February 20 in 1962. That was historic. The first American to orbit space. What an accomplishment by John Glenn. John Glenn would later become a U.S. Senator from Ohio. Then came Gemini. Then Apollo. Apollo had multiple missions. Apollo 1 was quite tragic. There was a practice run while the ship was sitting there on the, just ready to fire off. They were doing a practice training session when there was a flash fire in the capsule. It killed all 3 astronauts. That happened back in 1967. Tragic. A tragic, tragic, tragic event. And then Apollo 11, we had victory. Neil Armstrong walked on the moon July 20th, 1969. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Those were his words as he walked on the moon, as millions of Americans watched him walk on the moon. And there were some other people around the world watching as well. It was historic. It was amazing. And you can probably still see film clips of that event. Quite an experience. Then came Apollo 13. Now this was a little more difficult because there was excuse me, please forgive me. There was a part of the ship, like a filter or a gasket or something, that exploded while they were in flight. Well, the Apollo 13 crew was in flight, and it harmed the mission. It basically caused the mission to cut short because they were running out of oxygen, running out of energy, battery life was going down. So these 3 astronauts had to scramble to put different things together to make it home safely. They went around the moon and they came back home. They landed safely in one of the most heroic events of all time. What an amazing event that happened. It was called Apollo 13. We saw a movie about it in 1995. Quite a story. Then we saw with Apollo 13, and then later we got Skylab. Skylab was America's first space station. Then Apollo and Soyuz. Well, the U.S. and the Soviet Union had to eventually get together, and they did, for a united space effort. That happened once. Then we had the Shuttle Mir program. Now, I said that happened once with the Soviet Union. Then the Soviet Union fell apart as a country, and the Russians were all by themselves. They said, hey, Americans, let's do that again. So they got together with the U.S. one more time, but this time it's Russia. Russia and the U.S. did the Shuttle Mir program. Then the Project Constellation. Now, you got to remember, those engineers down in NASA, they're always thinking. They're always trying to find ways to learn more. And one way was to go to Mars. Why not? You've been to the moon, let's go to Mars, right? Well, only one problem. We don't quite have the technology to do it. Oh well. But you know what? They had an idea. That was Project Constellation, go to Mars. Only problem, the technology wasn't there yet, so they had to cancel the program. But you never know. We might still do it. Then you have Space Shuttle from 1981 to 2011. This was truly an amazing concept. Now you have to understand, normally you would watch a spaceship sitting on a stack of whatever you want to call it, and there'd be smoke coming out of the bottom. The rockets would start to explode, and you'd have a big bust of energy, a smoke be blowing down, and the rocket would go up in the air and be going up in the air. That was fantastic. And that's the way all these ships go up, right? Well, same with the shuttle. That would go up too like that. The only difference was, instead of coming back and landing on water, which was what most of the others did, everybody, Apollo 13 landed on water. Everybody would land on the water, somewhere in the ocean near Florida. This shuttlecraft came back to Earth and landed on a runway. Yeah. In other words, these astronauts are coming in, and they're all looking like a bunch of airplane pilots, and they're pulling into the runway, and they're coming to a halt. They have this, balloon that blows out there that stops their progress. You see all these balloons coming out, not balloons, but parachutes. That's the right word. Parachutes. They're coming out, and finally comes to a halt. Now, here's what's unique about the shuttle. They can use that craft again and again and again and again. It was reused over and over again. What a concept. Reusing the craft over and over again. Excuse me. And that worked for 30 years. Now, there were a couple of tragic moments. One happened January 28, 1986. Teacher named Krista McCullough was from New Hampshire. She and 6 other crew members, while the craft was just off the tarmac or just off the boosters, they were just shooting off into space here. And as Americans watched, it was making a curve, and next thing you know, it blew up. While millions of Americans were watching. It was a shock, especially since so many high school kids were watching because she was a high school teacher. Blew everybody out. It was just an awful experience. The President of the United States spoke that even to the nation about where our hearts were so big at that time for the people who were lost in that tragedy. Then we had February 1, 2003. The shuttle came back in and disintegrated as it entered the Earth's atmosphere. And all the astronauts on board were killed. That's right. While it was coming into Earth, after it had been in space for a few days, it came back to Earth and disintegrated. Another terrible tragedy. Then we had the International Space Station. That's been going on for 20 years. 1998 was started. The International Space Station was quite an amazing effort because they are right now up there. And of course, those of you who were at the library and looked at the virtual reality screen, you saw it. It's quite a setup. They go up there and they spend months doing experiments and studying and writing down research and all that stuff. And these people are from different parts of the world. Quite an adventure. So as you can see, friends, it has been an adventure. Now, unfortunately, we've had some tragedies, and they have been awful tragedies. But the good news is we've had so many more victories than tragedies. And as a result, we continue to find out what's in space. We continue to search the unknown. We continue to seek out that final frontier. Ain't that exciting? You're getting excited. Good. So am I. Oh, by the way, I think your teacher's about to enter the room. Later.